الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. We're going to move into the second chapter of the text. If people want to pull it up, it's the Book of Assistance by Imam Al-Haddad, rahimahullah. And we've been talking about the first chapter on yaqeen, on certitude. Now we're going to move into the second chapter, which is on intention, niyyah. Can somebody read the first paragraph of that chapter where it starts, "You must, O my brother," on intention?
You must, O my brother, improve the soundness and sincerity of your intentions. Examine them and reflect well before embarking on your actions. For intentions are the basis of deeds. According to them, your deeds will either be good or ugly, sound or unsound. The Prophet has said, "May blessings and peace be upon him. Deeds are only according to intentions. Each man has that which he intends." Okay. So a lot of us have likely heard some kind of discourse, conversation, lectures, khutbahs that talk about the importance of intentions. And here now, Imam Al-Haddad in chapter number 2 is giving us an insight that niyyah, intention, is a critical part in this roadmap that he's creating. What is the relationship if we were to say now that yaqeen, the first chapter, was the destination, right? To have kind of firm conviction, to be in a place where the idea is not that tomorrow you're going to suddenly just fall into a sense of certitude, right? But it's something that you're working towards, you're having aspiration towards. And so now in this chapter, he's talking about intention as something that is a next step. What's the relationship between these two things? Intention and yaqeen. Why is he putting this as the second chapter? Why is it not the first chapter if every act is rooted in intention? What do you think? Yeah.
Well, because without yaqeen, without the tawheed and the belief in Islam, whatever your intentions are don't really matter because your deeds won't be accepted.
Okay. What else? Exactly. Okay. Think about this as a roadmap, right? You don't want to learn sciences of Islam. You don't want to understand topics independent of each other, but you want to be informed through every piece of knowledge that you get to think about how that can inform and understand other aspects of knowledge that you have, right? This is where you can deepen in understanding and inshallah gain like wisdom and insight. So everything is not just seen from one vantage point, but we can think about it through multiple vantage points to be able to engage it in a deeper level. So if yaqeen is the destination that you're working towards, and this is kind of the trajectory we're looking at, right? Sirah has elements of movement to it. It's a pathway. Sharia is a path to the watering well, right? It's about movement. Tariqah is the spiritual path. But everything is about kind of moving. It's not about staying stuck or being paralyzed. So how does intention now fit into this idea of movement and achieving certitude, yaqeen, as a destination? Does the question make sense? So what is it about? How does it relate? Yeah.
I feel like in chapter 1 it specifically talks about like the fact that you're going to have to go on a journey, and so for chapter 2 to start off with like there's always intention before the journey actually begins is the reason why yaqeen comes before laying out that there has to be niyyah. in starting out that journey towards a destination.
Yeah. So if yaqeen is the destination point, it's where you want to land, right? And may Allah make us all people of yaqeen. If we know where the goal is, where I want to end up, and it's a trajectory now, a journey in pursuit of that destination, before you take a step, you got to know why you're stepping in the way you're stepping in the first place, right? You're not moving in default settings, but you have firm intention and awareness, consciousness. You can just spit out all kinds of things mechanically. We're going to pray Maghrib in a little bit, may Allah accept it from us, and the recognition of hadith that tell you things like, don't pray like a rooster, you're just pecking at the ground, because it's all mechanical. Right now, you could go and make wudu, and for most of us, because you've done it so many times again and again, it stops being a spiritual act. It's just the external form. There's still benefit through the form, but it's not getting to the depth of it, not because the form isn't there outwardly, but the inward presence to it isn't necessarily there. Does that make sense? So you don't want to function on default settings, right? But there's a certain wakefulness, a consciousness, a presence that allows for me to kind of traverse a worldly existence, knowing why it is that I'm going to do what it is that I'm doing prior to doing it, as opposed to the aftermath of the action being completed, where how many times have you had a conversation where you are either the one saying or it is said to you, sorry, I don't know why I said what I said. I don't know where that came from. It wasn't me, I'm just very tired, or I'm very stressed, or I'm really upset. But there's catalysts that are not a conscious mode exerted that now doesn't mean you're not moving, but you're just moving aimlessly. There's not a firm sense of why as to where it's coming from. Do you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So this hadith that is being mentioned here, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that indeed actions are by their intentions, it's a very particular understanding now that has to be understood as we look at this text. Because the amal is distinct from the fa'il, right? Because the amal has awareness to it. It has consciousness to it. It's not an act that is done without presence. You see? So right now, some of you are blinking your eyes. You don't have to think about blinking your eyes. And what kind of existence would it be if every time you blinked your eyes, you had to think prior to? Now I'm going to blink. Now I'm going to blink. Now I'm going to blink. Or if every breath that you breathed into this world was one where you still had to formulate a conscious mode of exerted thought in order to just breathe. I'm going to breathe now. I'm going to breathe now. Between blinking and breathing, you would be situated in such a frenzy that you couldn't really do so much else in the course of your day. And so there's a blessing, there's a rahmah to not having to think with presence about certain things that we do. Thanks, man. Jazakallah khair. You want a date? You sure? So that why of what we do is imperative to be able to just function in a way that makes us essentially human at the end of the day, right? What makes you distinct from the rest of creation? What gives you deep insight in terms of how you can offer accountability as something that is a spiritual vehicle? Well, it's this thing, this gift of intention. And most of the day you spend is spent devoid of an understanding of this why, right? And that can be applied to the fundamental choices that you make. Why did some people fast today? Why did I not fast today? It can be applied to the long-term goals. Why do you actually want to get married so badly? Why do you want a house? Why do you want to make as much money as you make? And what we're going to talk about after Maghrib is to think about this not through the prism of just what can again be rote and regurgitated. You want to do things for the sake of Allah, definitively. But knowing what that means and understanding what that looks like. Because most of us pursue what we pursue, not with a conscious mode or a present mode. Most of us pursue what we pursue because we feel like we're inadequate if we don't have those things. I want to be married to my wife, not because I think as if I'm deficient if I'm not. I want to be married to my wife for a positive, proactive reason. Right? I want to have a son, not because I think I'm lacking if I don't have a son, but I want to be able to understand that my having a son is something that I don't have to determine goodness of myself as a metric of whether I have a child or not. Do you see what I mean? Most of us pursue the jobs that we pursue, not with an element of positivity, but because we have a core belief that says, I'm not worthy of success. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not a good person. And then I start to set up now for myself a mindset that chases after things with intention that I haven't consciously constructed, but it's still defining how I pursue this world. The relationships that I keep, the relationships that I don't keep, what would people think, what would people say, is fundamentally an illustration of this. You get down to the building blocks of, well, why do I see it the way that I see it in the first place? Why do I think about it in the way that I think about it in the first place? The why of what I do fundamentally is just as important as the thing that's being done, arguably if not more so, because you're also then just hammering down again and again on this repeated behavior that gets you to not see the world through your actions a certain way, but to see yourself in a certain way, right? Do you love yourself? Are you comfortable with both the best parts of you as well as the parts that you don't want anybody to know about? Are you in a space where you are able to navigate both where you excel and both where you're not really doing so well? Do you see what I mean? Okay, can we start? On intention, yeah, go ahead.
You must, O my brother, improve the soundness and sincerity of your intentions. Examine them and reflect well before embarking on your actions. For intentions are the basis of deeds. According to them, your deeds will either be good or ugly, sound or unsound. The prophet has said, may blessings and peace be upon him. Deeds are only according to intentions. Each man has that which he intended.
So the assumption here is that you have an act and then you have an intention behind the act, or you have an act that has no intention behind it. So here's an action and it either has intent or no intent. And this can be broken down into good or bad. And here now, too, we want to understand the different things that this can be broken down into. And this is going to be important as we're trying to understand how we function day to day, because most of us exist in a mode of exertion that isn't necessarily rendering consciousness to the acts that we interject into the world. A lot of what we're putting into the world is actually done quite unconsciously, not consciously. You see? A lot of us aren't necessarily doing things through malintent necessarily, right? May Allah protect us from it. Some of us might be, you know. But this action also can be broken into a place of good and bad. And there's also a third category that's called laghu, which is basically just pointless. There's no benefit or detriment to it. You see? But we're going to focus more so on what's happening inwardly rather than what's focusing on what's happening outwardly. When you're doing something unconsciously, it doesn't necessarily mean that the breakdown is only that I have intent that's good and bad, or I have no intent at all. We don't want to leave it hanging at this place because that's too simplistic. It assumes then that also the formation of conscious intention is rooted purely on something that's developed within me cognitively that I have complete control over. There's nothing unconscious or implicit that's defining also that conscious mode of exertion. Do you get what I'm saying? You do? Yeah? What am I saying? Somebody tell me. You're nodding your head. Like if I'm in a place where the product that I am today, of yesterdays that I've lived for an entire existence, right? I'm turning 40 tomorrow, right? Make dua for me. My kids told me yesterday that I'm not a kid anymore, right? You're considered to be, you're shabab in Arabic up until you're 40. And then when you're 40, now you're not a kid anymore. But I'm turning into a grown-up tomorrow, it's true. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Make dua, make it till tomorrow. So here now, I'm a product though of 40 years of yesterdays that I've lived. That's not something that is just in a vacuum. You exist as a product of many days that you've lived prior to this day. And your socialization, the way that you were nurtured, the absence of nurture, the society around you, the environment, it cultivates an identity that some of you have heard me talk about that's very relevant to this conversation on intention that formulates for us what are called core beliefs. And a core belief is, do you guys want to move in this way? If we can come in. Yeah. Because this is going to formulate the crux of the why that you do what you do. And it's going to get kicked in unconsciously. And if you're not in a place where you understand cognitively how you function, do you know? If you're not in a place where there's a recognition of the why, it doesn't mean that it needs for you to be aware of it for it to actually transpire. Do you get what I'm saying? So a core belief is fundamentally how I see myself, how I see others, and how I understand the world around me. It's going to be things like, I am worthy of love, or I am not worthy of love. I am worthy of success. I'm not worthy of success. People like me. People don't like me. What this builds itself into in a second layer now are intermediary beliefs. And this manifests as rules and assumptions. So if I have a core belief that says I'm not worthy of love, I might build an intermediary belief or a rule from that says if I was thin, people would love me. Do you get what I'm saying? And this then builds itself up into actions and thoughts that get us to here. And you can see where that kind of can get problematized if I have a negative core belief. I'm not worthy of love. If I was thin, people would love me. And then I have behaviors attached to that rule that I've set up. That core belief affirms itself unconsciously through how I process reality around me. So reality is not just something that is absolute for everyone, right? We talked about this when we spoke about Aya's nephew, who's really cute. Remember the picture? We talked about it for those who were here 2 weeks ago. I wasn't here last week. So the guy that was here last week, that wasn't me. He's probably 1.5 feet taller than me, in case you didn't know. And this can be in any kind of prism. You can have a positive or a negative, right? The world is a scary place. Can be a core belief. People are unkind. Can be a core belief. If I don't talk to people, then I won't get rejected. Can be a rule or an assumption that we build up. Do you understand? And it plays itself out in now the formulation of action that's rooted not in the absence of conscious intention in that sense, but unconsciously we formulate this, and it sets up for us now parameters through how we walk through the world. If you're in this sphere of kind of recognition of where I'm at, and you are not in a place where these building blocks fundamentally you have a relationship with, it doesn't mean that they don't kick in, right? The example we use quite often is of the circus elephant. That when it's a child, it learns helplessness. It's tied up to be tamed. When it's an adult, it's now still in a place of learned helplessness, but it's literally the same rope tying it up as when it was a baby. And from the outside looking in, you say, well, just break the rope. But it's not a physical shackling, it's a psychological shackling upon the elephant that's now impacting its behavior. The intent that it's formulating is with a sense of self that says, I'm not strong enough. I can't do it. You and I, we have ropes that are pulling us in different directions, holding us back, compelling us forward, and whether we understand them or not, it doesn't mean that they're not there. When we talked about this in the prism of yaqeen, we talked about it to juxtapose theological beliefs, right? Articles of faith that even get rooted in this. So if I'm not worthy of love, then I can get to a place where my sense of self is also in a place that I believe all of my life is rooted in just punishment. I'm not worthy of love. If God loved me, then I would be married. I'm not worthy of love. If God loved me, then I would get that job. I would have that kid. I'm not worthy of love. Do you understand? I'd love for everybody to just spend some time between this week and next week thinking about how this kind of resonates with you as we get into this discussion on intention. Because you want to be in a place where you have a positive element to the pursuit of your life objectives, right? I don't want to chase money because I believe that having money makes me good. Because I have a core belief that says I'm not good. And then nothing is going to ever be enough. Because it's not money that's going to give me satisfaction. It's going to be a positive core belief. Or that I have to have marriage, or I have to have children. That I have these formulaic processes of success that now build themselves up unconsciously, but still manifest in what might be a conscious intention, but it's not rooted still in something positive. You can pay lip service to it, but your tongue is not where the intent comes from. It comes from your heart, and it comes from your mind, right? You have an aspiration that hears you, and you want to appeal to your higher self, right? The place of the mind and the heart, and not the lower self, the stomach and your sexual organs. Literally the way God constructs us is that the higher self is where aspirationally we can draw on some of these things from. Do you understand what I mean? But you got to know what's going on in your heart in order to then elevate it to a place where this is something that's not just good with a negative attached that I'm afraid of what the alternative is, but it's empowering. Like it gives you courage. You can walk on the street and not feel scared to do what it is that you have capacity to do. Does that make sense? So, your mind and your heart, right? The place of intention is not on your tongue. You express it, but the place of intention is in your mind and your heart, right? Ibn Taymiyyah, he says this, that the place of intention is not on the tongue, it's on the heart, and it's in the heart and it's in the mind, right? But if you don't know what the building blocks are of your conscious, you're going to live every day in a state of stress, right? Constantly with negative self-talk. And we're going to talk about some of this next week too, but you got to know like how it functions cognitively. You see what I mean? You're not just a product of the moment that you're in. You have like an entire life. If you grew up your whole life, right? There's not a joke that the Prophet ﷺ has grandchildren that help older companions fix their wudu. They stand in defense of Uthman radiallahu anh when he's being attacked because they hear their grandfather say that he loves them. It gives them a sense of socialization that yields positive core beliefs, right? If you lived in a way where people point out all your mistakes constantly, they mistreat you, they say you're not good enough, it's going to play a role in how you perceive reality, and then intents are not going to be things that are gifts or empowering. They're going to shackle you still inwardly in a way that you walk on eggshells and you walk with trepidation. Does that make sense? maybe right before we wrap up, for somebody who fasted today, if you could just tell us how that was experientially, because you want to get into the habit of fasting also, right? It's not just a Ramadan activity, but as part of your spiritual diet, you want to have a regular fast if you have the physical capacity to do so. So somebody who fasted today or has been fasting, how has that been for you? Even if you spoke before.
Well, for me it was a bit challenging because I've not fasted in a very long time. But then I woke up very late because I spent the night studying. So I woke up around, after Fajr, I slept, then woke up around noon. Then I was like, okay. Then I had a class, so I went for my class. It was 3 p.m. I said, let me eat something. But I remembered, Sheikh Khalid, we always say, just try. So I just said, let me try, since it was 6:15.
You did it, right?
Yeah.
Look at that, mashallah. Allah gave you so much in return. And it's important. I appreciate your vulnerability, because the idea is not that it's just without challenge, you see? But you stand up to yourself, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. The thoughts are not you, because somebody has to be thinking the thoughts. Just like you're not any one of your feelings, because who's then feeling the feelings? So when the thought comes, you don't become subservient to the thought. It's your mind, right? You're not subservient to it. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So mashallah, may Allah accept your fast. Anybody else who was fasting? Yeah. You raise your hand, Chrissy?
I have been fasting on Mondays. Today I didn't, and that's because I ended up getting my support at night for the next morning, and then I woke up after the Fajr time, and the food I didn't want to go bad, so I ended up eating it. So
that's so nice of you. Yeah.
But the days that I have been fasting, which thank you for starting the iftar, because that helped me, integrate it into part of my.
How did it feel to not fast after you fasted so many Mondays?
Kind of bad.
Yeah?
Yeah, I felt like I wasn't doing everything that I could. And then I thought maybe I could have taken that box of food and found somebody to give it to, but I didn't think of that in the morning.
But it's okay, it's an extra fast, right? And you don't want to interject something that starts to formulate this. Do you see what I mean? There's going to be some times where you do, sometimes you don't do. And naming that feeling, your heart gets attached to certain things, and that's just part of the growth, it's part of the process, So if you can fast, try to fast, right? Ideally by next semester, we're going to find iftars on Mondays and Thursdays. We have some alums here who maybe they can fund this for us, inshallah. We'll be able to provide iftar next semester as well. But you should try it, and it's something that if you struggle with it, you hear people are struggling with it, that's okay. If you miss some weeks, that's okay also, right? But getting into the habit and building a relationship with it.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.